Maggie, it's so good to see you again. 5 years ago, Hamnet the novel appeared on our bookshelves and Waterstones named it as their book of the year. And now here we are talking about a film adaptation which has got Oscar buzz and that you have co-written. Can you believe that you're at this stage now?
No, definitely not. And I kept saying, when the filming was getting closer and closer, I kept saying, well, it might not happen, it might not happen.
Yeah.
And then on day one of the filming, I called my husband from the set just to talk about something else. And he said, do you admit now that it's happening? We were standing, in a kind of Tudor film set. And I said, okay, maybe. Yeah, maybe it's going to happen now.
Because films get optioned all the time.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily come to fruition. But it's even more unusual, I think, for an author to actually adapt their own novel for the screen. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Well, I heard that Chloe Zhao was interested in directing it. And I was really pleased because I knew, having seen her films, I knew that she wasn't the kind of person who was going to package Hamnet into a kind of very neat, antiseptic, conventional costume drama, which I really didn't want any screen adaptation of Hamnet to be. And I also knew that she wasn't necessarily a Bardolata, someone who adored Shakespeare and was going to put him front and centre of the story. I mean, not that I think Shakespeare doesn't deserve to be front and centre of stories, but I think there are enough films about him. I wanted Hamnet to be about his family, about his domestic life, which I think has been very overlooked. So I knew that she was going to come at it from an interesting angle, but I also heard that she wanted me to co-write the script with her. So I went on a Zoom call with her and I was all prepared to say, actually, it's very nice of you to ask me, but I'm moving on. I've got other books to write. But she's a very persuasive person. So by the end of the Zoom, by the end of the 40 minutes, I was shutting my laptop and I just thought, I don't really know what happened. And I went back into the kitchen to my family and they said, oh, how did you take it? And I said, actually, I said, yes, I am going to do it. So, yeah, I'm still a bit surprised by that, but I'm glad I said yes.
Could you share a little bit about how that relationship works? Because you, as the author of the novel, obviously have a whole idea about how the story should be told, but then she, as a filmmaker, is coming from a different standpoint. How did you work together, and did you have any sort of red lines where you're like, well, that has to stay in there and it can't be changed?
It wasn't really that kind of process. I mean, I think as the novelist, if you go into it thinking or hoping that this film is going to be a replica or an exact version of your book, you're going to be disappointed. You can't really think of it like that. I mean, I think of the book, it's my baby, the book, but the film feels more to me like a niece or a nephew. I think the film sits alongside the book, and that's exactly as it should be. The film is Chloe's and the book is mine. And there wasn't really, Chloe came to the process with a very clear idea about which threads of the book she wanted to keep for the film. Because obviously the first job you have is a book was 360 pages. To make that into a 90-page screenplay, it involves an awful lot of rejigging and cutting, and you've got to kind of reduce the whole book down to its very sort of pith. And actually the whole process for me feels in a kind of three-dimensional sense like an hourglass. You have this very large structure and you bring it right down to its essence. And then I was able to watch Chloe building it up again into something else.
There is, we mustn't get into spoiler territory, but the ending of the film is different to the ending of the book. Quite subtly, but I think quite significantly. Without spoiling anything, it feels like it changes something slightly about, I suppose, the nature of that cathartic moment for them as a family. How did you both approach that ending? And I suppose at what stage in the writing did you decide to make that change?
One of the big joys of the film for me is that the ending sequence, without giving too many spoilers, the last 10 minutes is more expanded than the book. In a book, you can't write scenes where you put in large, undigested chunks of Shakespearean speech, as much as I would like to, but it just doesn't work on the page. So in the film, the final sequence, which is in the Globe Theatre, is it's very expanded, and you do get to see and hear his words, and you get to see the actors performing them, and that's wonderful because I wasn't able to do that in the book. It's all seen through Agnes's eyes, but we're able to experience it as if we were there.
You've mentioned Agnes. We have to talk about Jessie Buckley's performance because obviously
yes,
casting something like this, you must be sort of thinking, having ideas about who should play these parts. What I loved about the novel was the fact that it did put Shakespeare slightly to the side and Agnes is very much forefront. Jessie Buckley is astonishing in this film. What was it like watching her bring that character of yours to life?
She's amazing. She kind of is Agnes. As soon as Chloe was very sure right from the start that she wanted it to be Jessie. And I mean, I think it's absolute perfect casting. Jessie's an extraordinary actor in that she is able to communicate to the audience every single infinitesimal passing emotion across her face. I often think that it's a bit like weather across a landscape, and you see that passing over Jessie's face, and she's just so great. She's wonderful. She just is the kind of dream Agnes. I always wanted it to be Paul. Even before Chloe was involved, I always said to people, Paul Mescal for Shakespeare, please. I saw him years ago in the Gate Theatre. I think he was just still a student.
Yeah.
The Gate Theatre in Dublin. He was playing Stephen Dedalus. And there's a really interesting thematic link between Stephen Dedalus and Hamnet and Hamlet. So it was just always embedded in my head that it needed to be him.
He is brilliant in it. And I do want to just mention one other actor, Jacoby Duke,
Yes.
who plays Hamnet. That child is astonishing. And
He
I think
really
it's
is.
quite a tricky role. But again, watching that from your perspective, you must have been sort of slightly overjoyed to see such an amazing performance from him.
Jacoby's extraordinary. I mean, he's an amazing person because being on set and watching him do very, very difficult scenes, and he would do them over and over and over again. I mean, and he was 11 at the time. It was just jaw-dropping. He's one in a million, Jacoby.
And a brother too, who also features in the film.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know if it's a spoiler to say who his brother plays, but we won't say it. But that was a particularly joyous piece of casting.
Yeah.
When we realised, and actually it was very last minute. Apparently Chloe and Mrs. Dupe called Noah up and said, please, can you do this? And he did happen to have a week spare. So very, very, all the cards fell in the right place.
Chloe used her persuasion skills once again to...
She had, I think she cast spells on people or something.
Some of the scenes are very difficult to watch as a parent. And of course, I think when people go to see the film, there'll be plenty of sort of tears streaming down faces. But it did remind me slightly of your memoir, I Am, and particularly the chapter towards the end of the book, which is about your daughter. And I wondered whether some of your experience with your daughter's extreme allergies and sort of dealing with those health issues had played into your ability to write these sort of extraordinary scenes with Jessie and Hamlet.
Possibly. I mean, it's hard to kind of quantify which of your life experiences feed into your fiction. I think it's all there, I think, and it all happens. I mean, partly, I think that any novelist who says there is nothing autobiographical in any of my novels, I think is probably lying.
Yeah.
Because I think it does filter in even without you realising it sometimes. And I think all fiction is a kind of, it's a very sort of interesting soup of things that you make up and things that you borrow from reading other things and things that actually you do recast and redraft from your own life.
Agnes and her brother Bartholomew in the film are sort of keeping something alive from their own family, from their mother, which is this idea of keeping your heart open. And I wondered if you could sort of share a little bit about, I suppose, what that means and why that's such an important drive.
Well, I think what Agnes and Bartholomew have is, the 16th century society in England was very, very strict. So just for example, you had to attend Protestant Mass every week. And if you didn't, you were either fined or you went to prison, which actually happened to John Shakespeare. He was fined for not attending church. So at one point, you have this very, very rigid, structured society. There were certain things that only certain sections of society were allowed to eat, for example. But I always felt, and particularly it's very prevalent in Shakespeare's plays, that there's this huge countercurrent of other kind of very rebellious beliefs. There's a whole theory about whether the Shakespeares were actually Catholic, recusant Catholics. But also there's a huge belief in Shakespeare in the occult and in second sight. And I've always wondered where that came from. And so I embodied all of that counterculture, in a sense, into Agnes's family and her mother in particular.
I'm out of time, Maggie, but the little bit that I have left just to say huge congratulations on a fantastic film.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to see you again, Will.